So I apologize because it's definitely been a minute since I last uploaded, but with the 2025 to 26 NBA season around the corner, I figured why not come back and do some predictions for this season, because I've really been enjoying the preseason, and of course I'm very excited for this season to start up real soon. So today I want to go through my predictions for the Eastern and Western Conference standings, as well as the awards and who's going to win them for this season. So with all of that, I want to make sure we're not wasting any time, and let's go right into the rankings now, and we will start with the Eastern Conference. So let's start with spots 15, 14, and maybe even 13 that could be flipped around in the Eastern Conference, in my opinion. I'll say this as someone who's watched the Nets for over 25 years now. One thing I've definitely learned is that they always find a way to screw up their own goals. This year that goal is tanking. It's even been said by Joe Tsai and many others within the organization, and honestly I could see them screwing up that goal. The Nets definitely have a rough roster, and getting the best draft pick possible is obviously something they need to do. But even with that said, I could still see them failing to get the best draft pick possible and try to purposely lose games. I think a lot of that comes down to the tension that's been very evident and clear between the front office and Cam Thomas, who is clearly their best player as of right now. Cam looks like he's in the best shape of his entire career, and I could definitely see that playing into the fact that he'll spoil their tanking a bit. He's not the kind of guy that's going to carry them to, an extra 20 wins on the season, but he's certainly a very elite scorer and somebody that, has built up this real reputation within the organization and just from fans online of being a ball hog. But I think just from clips we've seen of him in training camp, as well as just different clips that have, come out throughout the offseason, he looks like he's in the best shape and really is going to play well this season. Now, moving on to Charlotte, I actually like what they did. I think bringing in veterans like Dinwiddie and Plumlee are actually smart moves, as well as Colin Sexton. I think they definitely should be a few games better than last year, and I think a part of that also plays into LaMelo's health. If LaMelo is healthy, they'll without a doubt be better than they were last year. And as for the Wizards, they're young, and this season is certainly about development for them. And even though I have them at 14, I think that they have 6 guys, legitimately 6 guys that could be long-term rotation players for them. I also really love the picks of Trey Johnson and Will Riley, and you add them in with Bilal Cullaby, Alex Sarr, Bub Carrington, and Kaishan George, and I think you really have a good group of guys. And George especially went under the radar, in my opinion, last season. Over the final 25 games last season, he averaged 10.2 points, 5 boards, 3 assists, 1.2 steals, and shot nearly 40% from deep. The Wizards won't be special yet, but give it a year or two, or maybe even a little longer than that, especially if they keep drafting well, and maybe we see them take a Detroit Pistons style leap. Now for spots 11 and 12, which are the first 2 teams that are going to be out or left out of the play-in tournament, I have the Chicago Bulls and Toronto Raptors. And honestly, I'm not sure where I would place either one of them, but I think they're definitely going to be in the 11 and 12 spots, most likely. They're both in weird spots as franchises right now, though. In terms of Toronto, they lost Masai Ujiri as their longtime executive, and that they really stood still in terms of their roster, and everything as a result of that, so they're kind of in the same place they were last year. And the Bulls also have kind of run it back. I mean, they really have no changes to their roster aside from replacing Lonzo Ball at point guard with, a swingman or forward in Isaac Okoro, who I do think is a very good defender. And it will also be interesting to see how their 12th overall draft pick from this year's draft, Noah Essengay, turns out. And we've pretty much seen that they're definitely going to be trading Vucevic. We've seen different rumors come out that it's 100% certain he's going to be traded. We've heard this for years, though, so who really knows? They did figure out the whole contract situation with Josh Giddey, and I do really want to see how Matas Buselli ends up being, you know what I mean? I think he showed a lot of glimpses of really great basketball last season during stretches. And the Raptors and Bulls are kind of in that in-between zone that no team really wants to be, where you're not getting playoff or play-in experience for your players, that will help them kind of build and develop. But they also don't look like they're bad enough as of right now, at least with the roster, kind of the way it's set up, both of these teams to really tank. So who knows? Maybe we see after the Vucevic trade, there's other trades that come and the Bulls can find themselves competing for that first pick. But with the lottery odds being the way they are, in the way Philly got a top 3 pick this year, you never know. At the 10th seed, I have the Indiana Pacers that are going to sneak into the play-in my opinion. The Pacers definitely have a weird roster makeup because obviously they lost Miles Turner to the Bucks, and also now Tyrese Halliburton had that Achilles injury that he suffered in Game 7 of the NBA Finals, so we're not going to see him at all, it looks like, this season. And it seems like it's going to be a brutal and very rough year for the Eastern Conference champs from last year. I think definitely expect Pascal Siakam to do these Swiss Army knife type things that he always does, and I actually do think that Andrew Nembhard is really going to shine this season, especially now that he's got a bigger role for this team, you know, with Halliburton being out and such, and he played a big role last year in the finals and the playoff run, but still. At 9, I have the Miami Heat, and I think losing Duncan Robinson is a huge blow for them. Yes, they did get Norman Powell, who I actually am a pretty big fan of. I think he's a very good player, but I don't really see them being much different in terms of how they were from last year in Miami. At 7 and 8, I have the Sixers and the Celtics. For Boston, they essentially have 4 players that they lost from last season, as we saw the departure of Holiday, Horford, and Porzingis, and then you now have Tatum that's out with the Achilles injury, and he's going to miss what would seem to be the entirety of this season. And I think that certainly pushes them down into the play-in territory, especially with the Eastern Conference getting a bit better. Yes, you know, obviously Indiana is also a team that's hurt, but Indiana's got a very, you know, or the conference, I should say, really overall just has a very weird kind of makeup this year. I think you're going to see teams shine. I'm going to get into that as we keep going. But watch out for Anthony Simons also for Boston, and maybe Boston is a bit better than I expect, and they can get a top 6 seed. But as of right now, I'd say they're probably one of those first 2 play-in seeds. In terms of the Sixers, I think they have definitely one of the most talented rosters in the entire NBA. The problem is going to come down to injuries. You know, I mean, Tyrese Maxey is phenomenal, and he really hasn't dealt with injuries in the way that we've seen Embiid and Paul George deal with. And Embiid, they're even flirting with him possibly coming back and playing a preseason game. So maybe he ends up actually playing the regular season opener, or I'm not sure, playing, you know, some point early in the season. With how skeptical I am on their injury woes, though, I'm definitely just going to keep them in one of the first 2 play-in spots for now, and hopefully they impress me. And like I said, if they are healthy, they'll without a doubt be a top 6 seed in my opinion. But for now, with the injury woes we have and knowing that Paul George certainly is going to be out for a bit, I'm going to keep them in one of these spots. Now, this is where it gets a bit weird in terms of the top 6 seeds, because just kind of ranking these teams and putting the order was very tough, or just it feels a little off even with it. I'm not super confident in some of these rankings, but this is just kind of after kind of going back and forth debating how I feel, as I have the Hawks at the 6th spot and the Bucks at the 5th spot. And the thing is, I really like what Atlanta did. I think adding Porzingis as well as Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Luke Kennard is going to be huge for them, and I wouldn't be surprised. I think honestly you're going to see this team thrive offensively in a lot of situations, because I think they can do a good job at running a 5-out offense. But it's funny because I think they're going to be a great offensive team, and then the Bucks, who I just spoke on being the 5th seed, I think are going to be a very good defensive team. I'm not sure how good offensively they'll be, but defensively I think Miles Turner, I should say, and Giannis will both do a very good job for Milwaukee, and they'll probably have one of the better, if not one of the best, defensive ratings in the league. And I am a pretty big fan of Trae Young and his game, and I feel like he really kind of goes under the radar in terms of being mentioned in terms of the best passers in the league. And honestly, I think as a playmaker, I love watching him, so I hope that we can see a lot of fun offense and offensive schemes for Trae Young this year. But at the end of the day, I have the Hawks at 6 and the Bucks at 5th. At 4, I have the Orlando Magic, as this is a team that I'm very bullish on this year, and I'm also super bullish on Paolo Banchero, as I think that he is certainly going to see an even bigger leap than last year. And even if it's not a huge leap, I think maybe just with him dealing with injuries last year and him being healthy this year, hopefully he'll be, you know, if he is healthy, obviously, you know, God forbid, I think we'll really get to see him shine a bit more. And I think with the additions of Tyus Jones and Desmond Bane, that this team is going to be even better than they were last year, especially if they're healthy, because like I said, Banchero and other guys were injured. And the Magic, even through injuries, had the 6th best defensive rating last year, and now you add guys like, someone like Desmond Bane. I think that's going to just bolster the defense even more, especially if they can keep Paolo healthy. And yes, losing KCP does sting. I'm definitely, obviously I know he left, but I do think that replacing him with Bane, you're really not going to lose much. And if anything, I think you gain something by getting Bane over KCP. Coming in at 3, I have the Detroit Pistons, and I think even despite losing the 6th Man of the Year candidate Malik Beasley, they actually recovered pretty well with the additions they made by picking up Duncan Robinson, who could fill in very nicely in terms of being that elite 3-point shooter that the Pistons need. And I also really love the pickup of Karis LeVert. I think that's a very solid pickup for them. And with this team already being very tough last year, and even missing someone like Jaden Ivey and still putting up a pretty decent fight against New York in the playoffs and just really being a tough team all season, I think they'll be even better. And that New York team that they put a tough fight up against, I actually have at number 2. They could even be the 1st seed, but as of right now, I'm sure you could probably already assume, since I named the other teams, that yes, I have Cleveland at 1. But I am just a bit skeptical in the Knicks, but I think if they can put it all together, they certainly have everything to be a number 1 seed. Personally, I think Mike Brown's system just fits better than Tom Thibodeau's did, and I also really love the pickup of Jordan Clarkson for them. I think that's a super underrated pickup, and I think the scoring punch that Clarkson, could provide, I think really will be a big help for them, and they could easily win the Eastern Conference in my opinion, especially with the woes that we saw from Cleveland come playoff time last year and just really over the years since LeBron's left. And yes, even despite Cleveland's woes, like I said, I do have them at number 1. We're not talking playoff predictions, we're just talking in terms of the end of the season rankings. I really like the addition of Lonzo Ball replacing, Okoro with him. And I think Larry Nance Jr. is actually going to be a solid bench piece, a solid rotation piece for them. Once Mobley and Jarrett Allen exit the floor, you could have him coming in providing good minutes. I thought he's looked pretty solid so far in the preseason. The Cavs certainly fumbled their chances last year for sure, especially with the fact that, a low seed like the Indiana Pacers were able to give OKC a tough fight. But at the end of the day, Cleveland couldn't beat that Pacers team, and I like that they didn't overthink anything, and they just really made small little tweaks like that, like picking up Nance, picking up Lonzo Ball, and I think that they're going to really possibly see the fruits of their labor with those pickups, I think, if they could just keep it all together. And now let's start with the Western Conference. At 15, I have the Utah Jazz. Probably not much of a shocker there, but I am actually very excited to watch Keontae George and Bryce Sensabaugh over there. I think they both were very underrated last year. At 14, I have the Trailblazers. This is actually a team I'm going to watch quite a bit because I actually really like the pickup of Drew Holiday over there. I think he could be a really good mentor for a lot of their young guys. And Dame returning obviously would have really bolstered this team, but obviously we know he won't be playing at all this season. He's going to be out for the whole year. And the thing is, their young core definitely showed flashes of looking great last season, in terms of consecutive games won, winning streaks and such. So honestly, maybe another year of development and having a mentor like Holiday pushes them above the 14th seed, but I just don't think they have a number 1 guy on that roster, especially after losing Anthony Simons, that is better than any of the number 1 options on the following teams that I have that are the teams out of the play-in between them and that spot. And those teams would be the Pelicans, the Kings, and the Suns. For the Pelicans, I'm very interested to see how Jordan Poole looks with the slimmed down Zion Williamson. We've seen, how much more thin he looked when he was in that first initial press conference meeting or whatever. The Kings are kind of in no-no land as they have a very strange, veteran-heavy roster. Sabonis is obviously a great player, so we'll see how much he can do, but they're probably already playing Outstanding by the Gap Band in that arena. And I had to come back and record this because while I was just going to get my haircut, I got the notification on my phone from Shams Charania saying that Russell Westbrook will now be signing with the Sacramento Kings. And I was going to go back and revise my standings a bit, in terms of my predictions and where I see them. But honestly, with the fact that you have Keegan Murray out now for at least a month with this thumb injury, UCL injury, and then also the fact that, honestly, I don't really see them being better than any of the teams that I have in spots 10 through 1. That honestly, I really wouldn't change much. Maybe I would put them in 11 instead of 12, but really not a huge change. I do think that Russ will provide them with some energy for sure, you know what I mean? Even though it is his 18th season, like I said, I do think that he will give them energy. So this will be an interesting team to watch, but I still don't see them being much better than I originally predicted. Like I said, maybe they jump from 12 to 11, but for the most part, I think they're going to probably stay around the same spot that I thought beforehand. And I think that for the Suns, Devin Booker is going to look great. I think he's going to put up great numbers. We should expect to see kind of the Devin Booker we saw pre-CP3, arriving in Phoenix. I guess that was 5 years ago now. But I think when your top guys are Jalen Green, as well as Dylan Brooks, I don't know how good the Suns will really be, but I do think that Devin Booker is going to have a great year offensively. And now on to the play-in seeds. At number 10, I have the Memphis Grizzlies, and this one definitely hurts to put them as a play-in seed because Ja Morant is one of my favorite players in the league. So I'd love to be wrong here, and I also really like the pickup of KCP as well as Ty Jerome. But I think losing Cole Anthony, Desmond Bane, and Luke Kennard is actually going to really hurt them. And one of the biggest reasons I have them as a 10th seed is because I've just become very skeptical. Just the fact that Ja Morant is already hurt. I hope that this is just a light little injury they're trying to be precautionary with, and they're keeping him out for now. So hopefully it's nothing major, and we get to see him play above 70 games this year. I think that'd be nice, or somewhere in that range. Now at 9, I have the team that picked first in the NBA draft this past year, the Dallas Mavericks. If Kyrie was going to come back sooner, I'd certainly have them much higher. And right now, I've seen reports saying somewhere from January to March is where they think Kyrie's going to come back. And I think even despite having 2 stars in Anthony Davis and Cooper Flagg, or just a guy that's looked at very highly like Cooper Flagg, I don't know if he's in that star range yet. I think the team's probably going to get very, very sick of D'Angelo Russell pretty early. And just through the injury woes that they've dealt with both of their stars, whether it's Kyrie or AD, and Kyrie starting the season injured, that they're a very hard team to predict because you don't know kind of how they're going to look together, and we don't know how Flagg is going to adjust to the NBA. I mean, I think he's definitely going to be a solid player, but who knows? Next up at 8, I have the Spurs, and this is yet another team that I'm very bullish on. So I love the De'Aaron Fox trade last year, as he's one of my favorite players, and he's going to miss the early part of this season, but they said probably a early November, first week of November return, so that's definitely nice for them. But the guy I'm really watching on that team is Dylan Harper's growth and development, as he's only 19 years old and he's looked great in the preseason, and I also have just been very high on him since even before college. And in one of my college basketball videos from last year, I actually said that I thought he was the most pro-ready player in all of college basketball last year. Yes, even more than Flagg. And I think he's looked very good, and Wemby's looked incredible in the preseason. And yes, it is only preseason basketball, but I mean, especially for someone like Wemby who dealt with blood clots last season, for him to come back and look this great, it's not going to affect him at all, it seems like. And he's only looked like he's gotten taller, so I think kind of the dominance of Wemby will probably be starting right now. But I definitely think the Spurs are going to have a chance to fight for a play-in spot, and maybe even a playoff spot if they win the play-in, as I think the duo of Harper and Wemby is going to be a scary duo for years to come. At 7, I have the LA Clippers, and I actually like a lot of what they did, but I just don't know how the Harden and Beal backcourt is going to look. And don't take having them at the 7 spot as really a knock, because I think with how tight the West is, you got to just understand that just last year, 6 games separated the 1 and the 4 seed, and only 8 games separated 1 and 6. And the reason I'm pointing it out is because the Clippers could still win 50 games and still be the 6, 7, or 8 seed. So it's certainly not a knock on them. And at 6, I have the Minnesota Timberwolves. There's really not much to say in terms of, the roster changes. I mean, the loss of Nickeil Alexander-Walker, I think, definitely will hurt, but I just think Anthony Edwards is such a star that I'm excited to continue watching him. He's another guy that's one of my favorite players, and I'm excited to see what he does this year. And another guy that I think is definitely an underrated role player and 6th man is Naz Reid. And I think he's going to be the best 6th man in basketball. And when we get to the awards, I kind of want to touch on that a little bit. But yeah, I think Naz Reid is going to have a phenomenal season this year. And at 5, I have the Lakers. I think the Lakers certainly have the talent to be higher, but I just think with how tight the West is, I feel kind of comfortable putting them at 5, especially with the fact that we've pretty much heard, it's just kind of confirmed there's going to be a load management season for LeBron. LeBron's already hurt. And it's not that Luka Doncic can't do a good job of carrying this team. It's just obviously having a guy that personally I look at as the best player to ever play the game of basketball, even despite him being, older now and he's not putting up the type of production he did in Cleveland or Miami. I think even, just losing the guy that most would say is obviously their second best player is going to hurt. However, Marcus Smart has been one of my favorite players since he was in Boston. I think he is a phenomenal player, and I'm very excited to see if he's still got anything left in the tank and can still be that clamp down defensive guy and also provide some good production alongside Luka and Adin. So this is a team that I'm definitely going to be watching quite a bit this year. At 4, I have the Golden State Warriors, and I think the addition of Al Horford is actually pretty huge for them. I also love that they figured everything out with the Kuminga situation, because I am a very big fan of his as well, and I think honestly, just judging from some of the facilitating we've seen from him in the preseason, he looked great, and he's looked like he's been on the money and locked in. So having a guy that I think is one of the best rotation players in the league back is huge. And we saw how good the Warriors trio of Butler, Draymond, and Curry looked together last year before Steph got hurt in the playoffs. So I think that honestly adding Horford and managing to keep Kuminga around is going to be big for them, and I'm excited to see how they look. At 3, I have the Houston Rockets. I think this KD-led Rockets team is going to be a lot of fun to watch, and they're going to be a very good team. They were already a top 10 team in terms of defensive rating last year, and now they're adding KD, Clint Capella, as well as Dorian Finney-Smith, so look out. That's a defensive nightmare for a lot of teams that they'll face, and I also think Amen Thompson is a guy that you got to watch out just on both sides of the ball, as he's definitely on the rise and a guy that's going to really be I think he's going to really have a shining season this year. And add that in with KD's leadership, that's going to help this young group of guys, and I honestly think they're going to be a very good team this year, and I have them at the 3rd seed as of right now. And at 2, this might surprise some people, but I have last year's champs, the OKC Thunder. I still think they're going to be great this season. I think Shea is going to have another MVP level season. Whether he wins the award, I don't know. I don't have him as the MVP as of right now. Just a little bit of a spoiler for when we get to the awards. But I think he's going to look great. I think J-Dub's going to be good. I think Chet Holmgren and Caruso are going to do their parts just like they did last year. And this team can absolutely win 60 games again, potentially, but I just don't think they're as good as the team that I have at number 1, which you probably could already guess is the Denver Nuggets. Personally, I love that move of swapping out MPJ for Cam Johnson. MPJ struggled terribly in 2024 as well as 2025 in terms of the playoffs. In the 2025 playoffs, he put up just 9 points per game on 39% shooting from the field and 34% shooting from three. And the year before that, in my opinion, in 2024, I think he's the reason they lost that series to the Minnesota Timberwolves. As in that series against the Timberwolves in 2024, he only averaged 10 points on 37% shooting from the field and 32% shooting from three. Cam Johnson, meanwhile, shot 47% from the field and shot nearly 40% from deep while averaging 18 points for the Nets this past season. And he was the #1 or #2 guy on basically every night for them. And now getting to play off of guys like Jamal Murray and, of course, multiple-time MVP Nikola Jokic is going to be huge to take the pressure off him. And then you add in a guy who's another guy that I love to watch with the Nets, Bruce Brown, and I think just bringing him back after him being away, I think is going to be huge for them. And I think you add in also Tim Hardaway Jr. and Jonas Valanciunas, and those are three huge gets for this Nuggets team that obviously has been very they've been able to contend the last couple of years ever since they won in 2023, but I think that really puts them over the edge, and I think they're going to be the best team in the Western Conference. I really do. And they might even finish with the best record in the entire league, not just the West. And with that said, I really like that addition of Cam Johnson. He's been one of those guys that I've been a fan of ever since he was at North Carolina after he transferred from Pitt, and I think honestly, with this kind of roster around them, that's kind of like a perfect lead into my award section that I want to do for this video, my reward predictions, because I do think that the 2026 MVP is probably going to be Nikola Jokic. And honestly, I hate to be that guy, but I've certainly got Jokic fatigue a bit in terms of winning the MVP award. And I hate to be like that because I know in terms of the NFL, one of my favorite players is Lamar Jackson, and seeing the way they had Lamar fatigue and they gave it to Josh Allen definitely kind of rubbed me the wrong way. So I hate to be that way with basketball. And, I'd much rather see someone like Shea repeat or Donovan Mitchell have, an outstanding year and get the award. But I think, honestly, with the way that I have, the Nuggets as the first seed, and I think Jokic is going to be a huge part of that. And, the options around him are only going to help him thrive even more, that he probably gets the MVP for 2026. I wouldn't mind being wrong on this, but if I was a betting man, I would definitely put money on Jokic to be the MVP for 2026. In terms of Defensive Player of the Year, I feel like this is pretty easy, as this is just an easy choice. It's been an easy choice for the last 3 years, and that's Victor Wembanyama. I think that Wemby should probably already have 2 Defensive Player of the Year awards, as I think he got robbed by Gobert 2 years ago, and obviously, his season was cut short this past year, but he did lead the league in blocks the past 2 seasons. So I think, honestly, just seeing the defensive prowess that he has and just seeing that, he's looked great in the preseason, I think, honestly, if he stays healthy, he's without a doubt going to be Defensive Player of the Year this year. For Rookie of the Year, honestly, I feel like we're going to have to talk about the politics of the NBA and certain things. I do think that Cooper Flagg is going to get it, despite the fact that I've been very bullish on the fact that I think that Dylan Harper is going to have the best season for any rookie. I do think that Flagg will look good, but I just think Harper having Wemby alongside him, it's going to just help him, rack up the amount of assists. And I think also, like I said, I really do believe that Dylan Harper is the most pro-ready player from this rookie class, and I think he's going to really thrive offensively. And I think that duo of Harper and Wemby is going to be special for decades, and I think you're really going to see just some great glimpses from them together this season. And I think, while yes, I think that Cooper Flagg will get the award, I think the best rookie this year will be Dylan Harper. And kind of sticking with the politics of sports and the NBA and stuff, I think that the 6th man of the year is going to be Alex Caruso. And honestly, I think personally, Naz Reid, who I spoke on earlier, I think is going to have the best season for any 6th man. But I think after the fact that Caruso got snubbed last season and it got given to Peyton Pritchard, that they're going to kind of do a makeup call. They're going to give it to Caruso this year, even though I think that Naz Reid will be the most deserving and he's going to have a huge role in Minnesota's success. So I'm going with Alex Caruso, even though, like I said, I think Naz Reid is going to have the best season for any 6th man in the league. For most improved player, I'm going with Azar Thompson. Ever since he got drafted, he's been a guy that I've watched quite a bit and followed. And when he dealt with the blood clots that, shortened his season 2 seasons ago, it was a rough blow. And I thought he came back and looked very good last season for Detroit and played a big role in their success. And I think, honestly, just, being 2 seasons removed now from those blood clots, I think you're going to continue to see him just keep getting back to the level that he should be at, in terms of his development. I think he's going to have a great year. Many people are saying his brother, Amen Thompson, is going to actually be the, most improved player. But I think Azar is really going to shine for Detroit. And I think, just the big role he's going to have with this Pistons team and really helping Cade Cunningham and, Jalen Duren, Jaden Ivey really, get success. I think that Azar Thompson is probably going to be the most improved player. And even if I'm wrong, there's still going to be a guy that I'm rooting for to win the award. But I will, I'm going to probably have to put my bias into this and say Azar Thompson. Like I said, if it's not him, I could definitely see it being someone like Amen Thompson, his brother. And for Coach of the Year, it was definitely a choice between, personally for me, Mike Brown and Jamal Mosley. But I'm going to go with Jamal Mosley, as I think that he's got a less talented roster than Mike Brown does. And I think, honestly, we're going to see a really good job in terms of getting the most out of these guys. I think the thing is that Mike Brown, while like I said, I think his system will fit today's NBA better than Tom Thibodeau's did in New York. I think we've already seen success for the Knicks. I just don't, I just personally think Jamal Mosley is going to get the award over Mike Brown. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think just seeing the way he got great production out of guys like Goga Batadze, as well as Mo Wagner last year, Jamal Mosley in Orlando, I'm very interested to see what he's able to do this season. And like I said, hopefully they stay healthy, because I think they looked great even despite injuries last season. And I think down low, having Banchero, Carter Jr., and the two guys I mentioned, Wagner and Batadze, is going to be huge defensively. So I'm very excited for this group. And yeah, like I said, I got Jamal Mosley as the Coach of the Year personally. So yeah, that's the full prediction video. It was definitely a longer one. And I do want to know down in the comment section what you think about anything that I mentioned in terms of awards, the standings, etc., whether you agree or disagree, and just what teams or players that you think are going to surprise the most this season. If you enjoyed the video though, then make sure to give it a like, as it helps me out a lot. And if you're new to the channel or returning to the channel and not subscribed, then definitely make sure to hit that subscribe button, as I have a lot of fun content planned, especially with the season starting up real soon. Thank you so much for watching though, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.